The atmosphere within the executive suites of Forrester Creations has been nothing short of toxic, a suffocating pressure cooker of ambition, resentment, and generational warfare that was bound to explode. For weeks, the corridors of power have echoed with the bitter, unrelenting clashes between Brooke Logan and Steffy Forrester Finnegan. The battle lines were drawn over the coveted co-CEO chair, a position Steffy guarded with an iron fist and a condescending sneer, while Brooke, fueled by the righteous indignation of her marginalized daughter Hope, launched a relentless corporate siege. The air in the CEO office crackled with venomous energy, every design meeting devolving into a ruthless power struggle, every strategic decision weaponized to inflict maximum psychological damage. The sheer weight of this animosity has been building toward a catastrophic breaking point, a moment of reckoning that would inevitably demand a devastating toll from the women who dared to play this high-stakes game of corporate thrones. That breaking point arrived with a terrifying suddenness, shattering the fragile veneer of control that Brooke had so desperately maintained. Under the crushing, unimaginable pressure of the relentless war with her stepdaughter, the formidable Logan matriarch finally succumbed to the physical and emotional toll of her ambition. The scene in the executive office was a tableau of absolute horror. Mid-argument, while fiercely advocating for her rightful place beside her husband, Brooke's face drained of color. The vibrant, defiant fire in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by a hollow, terrifying vacancy. With a chilling gasp that silenced the room, Brooke collapsed, her elegant frame crumpling to the plush carpet of the office she had fought so fiercely to conquer. The shocking image of the seemingly invincible Brooke Logan lying unconscious on the floor of Forrester Creations marked the violent climax of a feud that had finally crossed the line from professional rivalry to physical devastation. The frantic rush to the hospital was a blur of flashing sirens and suffocating panic, stripping away the glamorous facade of the fashion empire to reveal a family in absolute crisis. In the sterile, unforgiving light of the emergency room, the doctors delivered a grim diagnosis that sent shockwaves through the Forrester family. Brooke had suffered a severe physical and nervous breakdown, a catastrophic collapse brought on by profound, unrelenting exhaustion and extreme psychological stress. The medical professionals were unequivocal in their assessment. Brooke's body had simply shut down under the immense weight of the corporate warfare. She required immediate, uninterrupted rest, completely removed from the toxic environment of Forrester Creations. The diagnosis was a damning indictment of the brutal environment that had been allowed to fester within the company, a stark reminder that the pursuit of power could exact a deadly price. The doctors explicitly warned that any further exposure to such extreme stress could have fatal consequences, instantly raising the stakes of this family drama to life and death. For Ridge Forrester, the sight of his beloved wife lying frail and helpless in a hospital bed was a devastating blow that shattered his entire world. The charismatic patriarch, who had spent weeks desperately trying to navigate the impossible middle ground between his wife and his daughter, was suddenly drowning in a sea of profound guilt and agonizing regret. He looked at Brooke's pale face, the monitors beeping a steady, clinical rhythm that underscored the fragility of her life, and realized that his passive attempts at peacemaking had been a catastrophic failure. Ridge blamed himself for not stepping in sooner, for allowing Steffy's arrogance and Brooke's ambition to escalate into a life-threatening crisis. In that quiet, sterile room, holding his wife's trembling hand, Ridge experienced a profound paradigm shift. The corporate machinations of Forrester Creations meant absolutely nothing compared to the life of the woman he loved, and he knew he had to take drastic action to protect her. Driven by a fierce, protective instinct and a desperate need to rectify his past inaction, Ridge made a decision that would send seismic tremors through the fashion industry. With a cold, unyielding resolve that he rarely directed at his own flesh and blood, Ridge temporarily suspended Steffy Forrester from her duties as co-CEO. The confrontation was explosive, a bitter clash of wills that laid bare the deep fractures within the Forrester family. Ridge explicitly blamed Steffy's relentless hostility and childish tyranny for driving Brooke to the brink of death. He stripped his daughter of her power, banishing her from the building to ensure that Brooke's recovery would not be tainted by the venom of their ongoing feud. For Ridge, it was a necessary sacrifice, a definitive statement that he was choosing his wife's survival over his daughter's corporate dominance. It was a move that echoed the heavy-handed tactics of his own father, Eric, proving that when the Forrester men are pushed to the brink, they will burn their own empire to the ground to protect the women they love. Steffy was completely blindsided, her smug sense of absolute victory evaporating into a cloud of furious, blinding outrage. To be suspended from her own family's company, to be treated as a toxic liability while Brooke played the tragic victim, was an insult that Steffy simply could not swallow. She viewed her father's decision as the ultimate betrayal, a sickening capitulation to Brooke's endless emotional manipulation. Steffy raged against the injustice, her mind racing with dark, vengeful thoughts as she was forced to pack up her office and step away from the empire she believed she had saved. The suspension did not humble Steffy. It radicalized her. It cemented her belief that Brooke Logan was not a fragile victim, but a ruthless, calculating parasite who would stop at nothing to bend Ridge Forrester to her will and steal the company out from under the true Forrester heirs. The ghost of Stephanie Forrester seemed to whisper in Steffy's ear, fueling a generational hatred that refused to die. But the true masterpiece of this sweeping melodrama was unfolding far from the gleaming towers of Forrester Creations, within the quiet, seemingly tranquil confines of Brooke's recovery room. While Ridge hovered anxiously, believing his wife to be resting and healing, Brooke was orchestrating a brilliant, unprecedented corporate coup. From her sickbed, Brooke transformed herself into a powerful, untouchable shadow CEO. The physical weakness that kept her confined to her bed did nothing to diminish her razor-sharp strategic mind or her burning ambition. In fact, her illness provided the perfect, impenetrable cover. While Steffy was exiled and Ridge was consumed by worry, Brooke began to secretly pull the strings of the entire fashion empire, directing the flow of power with a masterful, invisible hand that no one, least of all her husband, could detect. It was a breathtaking display of resilience and cunning, proving that Brooke Logan is never more dangerous than when the world believes she is defeated. To execute this audacious shadow governance, Brooke needed a loyal, unquestioning proxy, a vessel through which she could wield her power without arousing suspicion. She found the perfect instrument in her daughter, Hope Logan. Hope, who had been marginalized, disrespected, and pushed to the absolute brink by Steffy's condescending leadership, was more than ready to step into the void. Armed with her mother's brilliant strategies and fueled by her own righteous desire for vindication, Hope became the ultimate corporate weapon. She walked the halls of Forrester Creations not as a defeated designer, but as the silent executioner of Brooke's will. Every design approval, every budget allocation, every subtle shift in company policy was dictated by Brooke from her recovery bed and flawlessly executed by Hope in the executive suites. The mother-daughter duo had effectively hijacked the company right under the noses of the Forrester family, turning their greatest moment of vulnerability into their ultimate triumph. For Hope, this clandestine arrangement offered an intoxicating taste of the power she had been denied for so long. Acting as the proxy CEO allowed her to bypass Steffy's blockades and breathe life back into the Hope for the Future line, all while operating under the protective umbrella of her mother's unseen authority. The dynamic between Brooke and Hope shifted into a high-stakes partnership, their secret communications filled with coded language and strategic maneuvers. Hope found herself marveling at her mother's ruthless efficiency, realizing that Brooke's collapse had not broken her spirit, but rather sharpened it into a lethal blade. Together, they were dismantling Steffy's legacy piece by piece, enacting a silent revolution that would fundamentally alter the balance of power within the company. Yet, the burden of maintaining this massive deception weighed heavily on Hope, who knew that if they were caught, the fallout would destroy them both. The brilliance of Brooke's strategy lay in the absolute perfection of her illusion. Whenever Ridge entered the room, the corporate mastermind vanished, instantly replaced by the frail, exhausted wife who needed his strength and protection. Brooke played the role of the recovering patient with Oscar-worthy precision, her voice weak, her eyes fluttering shut as Ridge stroked her hair and promised her that everything would be all right. She allowed Ridge to feel like her savior, feeding his ego and securing his unwavering loyalty, while simultaneously using his protective mandate to keep Steffy locked out of the company. It was a breathtaking display of psychological manipulation, a testament to Brooke's unparalleled ability to weaponize her own vulnerability to achieve absolute dominance. She was acutely aware of the risk she was taking, knowing that if Ridge discovered she was using her illness to run the company, his trust in her would be shattered forever. However, Steffy Forrester is not a woman who remains in the dark for long. Stewing in her forced exile, stripped of her title and her daily influence, Steffy began to piece together the subtle, disturbing anomalies emanating from Forrester creations. She noticed the strategic shifts that bore the unmistakable hallmark of Brooke's thinking, the sudden elevation of Hope's authority, the seamless continuation of operations that should have been paralyzed by the leadership vacuum. The realization hit Steffy with the force of a physical blow. Brooke was not incapacitated. Brooke was running the company. The illness, the collapse, the dramatic hospitalization. Steffy became absolutely convinced that it was all an elaborate, sickeningly manipulative performance designed to sideline her and steal the throne. The very thought that Brooke was playing her father for a fool while secretly reigning as a shadow CEO sent Steffy into a spiral of vengeful determination. Fueled by a toxic cocktail of righteous indignation and burning hatred, Steffy made a solemn, unbreakable vow to expose Brooke's grand deception. She transformed from an exiled executive into a relentless corporate investigator, determined to rip the mask off the Logan matriarch and show her father the ugly truth. Steffy knew that simply accusing Brooke would not be enough. Ridge was too deeply entrenched in his protective savior complex to listen to mere allegations. Steffy needed undeniable, irrefutable proof that Brooke was faking the severity of her illness and actively managing the company from the shadows. She began to mobilize her own loyalists within the building, quietly gathering surveillance, tracking communications between Hope and the hospital, and meticulously building a case that would destroy Brooke's carefully constructed illusion. Steffy was no longer just fighting for her job. She was fighting for her father's soul and the very survival of the Forrester legacy. The conflict inevitably shifted from the boardroom to the hospital, transforming a place of healing into a volatile, high-stakes battlefield. Steffy began to make unannounced visits to Brooke's recovery room, ostensibly to check on her stepmother's health, but in reality, to probe for weaknesses, to catch Brooke in a moment of unguarded strength. The atmosphere in that small, sterile room was suffocatingly tense, thick with unspoken accusations and venomous pleasantries. Steffy would stand at the foot of the bed, her eyes narrowed and cold, calculating scrutiny, firing subtle, probing questions about the company's operations. Brooke, ever the masterful actress, would deflect with weak smiles and feigned confusion, her heart pounding as she engaged in a terrifying game of psychological chess with a woman who was desperate to see her fall. The hospital room, filled with the scent of antiseptic and the hum of medical machinery, became the epicenter of their war. The psychological warfare between the two women reached unprecedented levels of cruelty and brilliance. Steffy would deliberately drop pieces of alarming company news, hoping to provoke a reaction, to see the sharp, calculating CEO break through the facade of the helpless patient. Brooke, sensing the traps, had to exert superhuman self-control to remain passive, to let Hope handle the fires while she maintained her fragile illusion. It was an exhausting, terrifying dance on the edge of a razor blade. One slip of the tongue, one moment of excessive energy, and Brooke's entire shadow empire would collapse, taking her marriage and her daughter's career down with it. The hospital room became a pressure cooker of paranoia and deception, a space where every breath, every sigh, and every heartbeat was a calculated move in a deadly war for survival, pushing both women to the absolute limits of their endurance. Caught squarely in the crossfire of this invisible, devastating war is Ridge Forrester, a man whose trust is being tested to the absolute, shattering limit. Ridge is standing on a precipice, torn between the two women who define his existence. On one side is his daughter, Steffy, screaming that he is being played for a fool, presenting a compelling, terrifying narrative of Brooke's ultimate manipulation. On the other side is his wife, Brooke, lying frail and broken, her very survival seemingly dependent on his unwavering protection and belief. Ridge's mind is a tortured battlefield of conflicting loyalties and agonizing doubts. He wants to believe the best of his wife, to trust the fragility he sees with his own eyes, but the seeds of doubt planted by Steffy are beginning to take root in his soul. The psychological toll on Ridge is immense, a crushing weight that threatens to break the patriarch who has spent his life trying to keep these two warring factions from destroying each other. As the days pass and the shadow governance of Forrester Creations continues, the tension is building toward an apocalyptic explosion that will forever alter the landscape of Los Angeles. Steffy is closing in on the truth, her investigative net tightening around Hope and Brooke's secret communications. Brooke is playing a dangerous, exhausting game, her physical recovery actually hindered by the immense stress of maintaining her dual life and fighting off Steffy's relentless probes. And Ridge is slowly being crushed by the weight of the impending revelation. When the truth finally comes to light, when Ridge discovers whether his daughter is blinded by a pathological hatred or his wife is the architect of a monstrous deception, the fallout will be catastrophic. The battle lines have been drawn not just in the boardroom, but in the very heart of the Forrester family, and when the dust settles, nothing will ever be the same again. This incredible saga is a testament to the enduring, unbreakable cycle of the Forrester-Logan feud. It is a story that transcends mere corporate ambition, delving into the darkest, most visceral depths of human psychology. Brooke's transformation into a shadow CEO is perhaps her most brilliant, ruthless maneuver in a lifetime of survival, a breathtaking display of her absolute refusal to be defeated by anyone, especially Stephanie Forrester's granddaughter. Steffi's relentless pursuit of the truth highlights her unyielding, almost terrifying dedication to her family's legacy, a loyalty that borders on an all-consuming obsession. And Ridge, the eternal prize in this endless war, remains the tragic figure caught in the middle, destined to have his heart broken regardless of who emerges victorious. As we watch this gripping drama unfold, we are reminded that in the world of the bold and the beautiful, love and hate are simply two sides of the same, deadly and